Welcome and thank you for joining us. I'm Andrea Sarate, CCI Program Coordinator. I'm a guest on the unceded Tonga, Kish, and Chumash land. Before we begin, we have a few housekeeping items. This webinar is being recorded and will be made available on CCI's website in the next few days. We've enabled Zoom's automatic live transcription. Let me double check, make sure that's going. Okay, so the live transcript is at the bottom at the Zoom toolbar, and you'll see a pop-up menu and choose Show Subtitles or View Full Transcript. If you need assistance, message me directly through the chat and I can walk you through the steps. And I'm going to drop the slide deck in the URL chat, so you'll be able to see that too. And then finally, we will have time at the end of the presentation for questions. Feel free to submit your questions via the Q&A box before then or during the Q&A portion. Okay, so now I'm going to turn it over to my colleagues, Laura and Nicole.
Thanks, Andrea. Hi, everyone. Hello, I'm Laura Papadi. I'm CCI's Program Director. I want to acknowledge that I'm a guest on Patwin, Muekwa, and Karkin land. Along with Andrea, I'm joined by Nicole Winthrop, CCI's Program Associate. Thanks for joining us today. During our time together, we'll be providing you with context for how the Cali Catalyst program came to be, an overview of the program's guidelines and application, and some general application tips before going into the Q&A at the end. You can go to the next slide. If you're new to CCI, we're a 501c3 nonprofit that was founded in 2001. We're headquartered in Los Angeles with an office in the Bay Area. Our focus is on supporting artists and arts workers exclusively, which we do through our business trainings and workshops, commission research, and our grant making programs. And we offer a range of grants, some long-standing, others that are more ephemeral, and each with a different priority, such as supporting professional development activities, arts-based businesses, and the creation of new work, all of which you can learn about through the funding section of our website. Regarding CALI Catalyst, while this program just launched on June 1st, 2021, it's actually part of a lineage of the Evolving with the Times California Arts Leaders Investments, aka CALI, portfolio, which has been marked by different phases of grant-making priorities since its debut in 2011. In its first years, the Next Gen program, as it was initially known, was a professional development pipeline for young talent. Then, when it was renamed CALI, it emphasized externally facing opportunities that prepared emerging arts professionals for managerial level roles. Most recently, from October 2018 through January 2021, we offered CALI Accelerator, which prioritized helping emerging arts professionals to develop their leadership vision and voice in order to prepare them to be influential in their organization, discipline, or larger arts and culture field. Next slide. So I started with the previous slide, not as a walk down memory lane. Instead, this was meant to demonstrate that CALI, writ large, is by design meant to iterate, shift, and change in response to current needs and circumstances in the arts and culture sector. So what informed CALI's current iteration, CALI Catalyst? What is it responding to? Since the onset of the pandemic in March 2020, and increasingly after the murder of George Floyd, we've watched various individuals and groups of individuals, both in California and around the country, who have confronted, critiqued, challenged, and changed inequities in the arts and culture sector. I've included some references on this slide, such as in your top left corner, Quanice Floyd's opinion piece that was published on Hyperallergic entitled "The Failure of Arts Organizations to Move Toward Racial Equity." This was an article where she called on National Arts Service Organization, Americans for the Arts, for transparency and accountability regarding their efforts to advance racial equity. Below that, you'll see a Better Guggenheim. That's the logo that's on their Instagram account. This is a collective of cross-departmental Guggenheim staff, I believe just the one that's in New York, but it's staff past and present who have brought visibility to the institution's treatment of museum workers, particularly frontline staff, and work to dismantle its perpetuation of racism. In the upper right corner, there's the artwork from We See You White American Theater. This was a statement created and signed by a coalition of BIPOC theater artists addressing anti-Blackness and racism in the American theater. And below that is a little screen grab of My Dearest Arts Organization. Are you listening? This was a representational collage of perspectives shared by teaching artists about inequities in the field, such as intellectual property appropriation and lack or little compensation. This manifested as both an online publication and a video. And I should mention that all of these examples came about in 2020 and continue into 2021. And I also just scratched the surface as far as describing these, just in the interest of time, but these and many more like it were inspiring and influential in shaping CALI Catalyst because of the impacts they generated directly or the impacts that they laid the groundwork for. Next slide.
All right, so what is CALI Catalyst? CALI Catalyst provides unrestricted grants of up to $5,000 to California changemakers whose bold actions are shifting the arts and culture sector in ways that give underrepresented populations, Black, Indigenous, people of color, LGBTQIA+, and people with disabilities more power and influence. So I'd like to address some of the items in bold. Unrestricted. This isn't project-based award and isn't meant to accomplish specific outcomes. Rather, it can be used by the grantee in whatever way is helpful to them, with the exception of applying funds to lobbying or election influencing activities. Bold actions. Actions that have taken place in 2020 or later, or actions that are in progress. Bold because they result in tangible change or shifts within the sector. Which brings us to arts and culture sector. We use this term to refer to the industries and their constituent parts, its institutions, products, services, and individuals. In short, the arts and culture sector is inclusive of organizations, individuals, and the activities of both. It includes museums, galleries, theaters, arts and culture nonprofits, as well as the many arts disciplines, cultural practices, organizations, businesses, workers, channels of support throughout philanthropy or government funding as examples. Finally, power and influence. Some of the questions we had in mind when using this language were, how does your change-making activity give more power and influence to underrepresented communities and people within the arts and culture sector? Has your work resulted in underrepresented people manifesting leadership roles or having decision-making agency and determination within the arts and culture sector? Or has your work mobilized people to work collectively? Next slide, please. What does CALI Catalyst support? CALI Catalyst prioritizes support to applicants whose bold actions, either those that have already taken place 2020 or later, or are in progress, tangibly help underrepresented communities, including Black, Indigenous, people of color, LGBTQIA+, and people with disabilities, gain more influence and power in California's arts and culture sector. Note that we're prioritizing actions that have taken place in 2020 or later, as these applicants may be suffering financial fallout as a result of challenging the sector's status quo. Applicants who are of underrepresented communities, but if they are not, whose bold actions are in the interests of underrepresented communities and are explicitly moving the needle for these populations to have more inclusion, influence, and power. And finally, applicants who reside in a non-metropolitan region. This is 2021 grantee Ann James. Ann is one of 4 grantees selected from 114 applicants in Cali Catalyst's pilot grant making round. She received support for her work in the still nascent intimacy industry. Specifically, she spoke out about how leadership in the intimacy direction field didn't fairly represent the global majority. She also founded intimacy coordinators of color to provide her skills as an intimacy professional and to accredit others. In so doing, Ann is actively influencing the direction of this emerging priority away from the field's homogeneity.
Okay, 2021 application deadlines. Cali Catalyst is offering 3 open application rounds in 2021. Applications are due by 5 p.m. Pacific time on the 15th of every other month, with a 1-month response turnaround. For the 2021 award cycles, application deadlines and notification dates are, and I should say these are the remaining ones of the calendar year. Next up is September 15th, with notification by October 15th, and then November 15th is the next deadline with notification by December 15th. And you'll see the asterisk there next to December 15th. That is in reference to a new policy. Applications accepted from September 16th through November 15th will be subject to refined review criteria and an expanded reference checking process. Additionally, nominations will no longer be accepted. Yesterday, on August 24th, we published a press release on our website announcing the first round of amazing Cali Catalyst grantees. The press release also describes updates that will be implemented on September 16th, which we'll elaborate on in subsequent slides. And any changes that we point out will also, to application ephemera, will also be underlined in the slide deck. We can continue.
Cali's eligibility criteria remains the same. Applicants can be individuals or teams of individuals. To be eligible for Cali Catalyst consideration, applicants must be an artist or arts worker. Examples are arts administrator, cultural producer, culture bearer, creative, cultural practitioner, teaching artist, or specialized technician, and a full-time resident of California. The asterisk notes that only 1 application will be accepted per team. That is, individual team members can't submit separate applications that describe the same bold action. Teams therefore need to select a single team member to apply, and if funding is approved, this individual will be responsible for fulfilling the grant requirements. This is Rhiannon Evans McFadden is another inaugural Cali Catalyst grantee. They co-organized and co-facilitated public forums for accountability and for speaking openly to the press about the misappropriation of resources from BIPOC organizations and artists by large white-led nonprofits and civic bodies. This work led Rhiannon to appear in Bay Area news outlets, KQED, and SF Chronicle on matters of funding and labor. The Chronicle pieces centered their image and strong language about how inequitable funding harms communities, and that the forces for healing, safety, and culture must remain entirely in the hands of BIPOC communities and organizations.
Okay, Catalyst review criteria. So Cali Catalyst review criteria remains fundamentally the same. What's different is that we've added more specificity to more clearly target the intended beneficiaries. And these updates are underlined. So 1, impact on arts and culture sector. In our current set of guidelines, our assessment question under this criterion asked, is the change-making action shifting assumptions and potentially sector-wide behavior? We realized that this was too broad, and instead, effective September 16th, are introducing the following assessment questions. First, is the applicant's change-making action shifting entire sectors, such as the entirety of the museum or theater sectors, to move away from the status quo? Next, are there tangible and measurable ways that the applicant is helping underrepresented communities gain more power, for example, through governance authority, through causal changing of the guards, or shifting industry or regulatory policies and practices? And then, did the applicant play a causal role in the catalyzing change that was realized? The next criterion, intention to enact greater inclusion, access, diversity, and equity. This remains the same. Is the applicant's change-making action aimed at helping underrepresented communities gain more influence, build power? Informed perspective. Does the applicant have direct experience with the arts and culture sector, and are they of an underrepresented community? Next slide.
This is a representative image of 2021 Cali Catalyst grantee Joel Garcia's change-making work. Joel played a critical role in the removal of Los Angeles's Columbus statue in 2018 and later in the removal of its Father Sarah statue 2020. Both removals were strategic actions to raise the visibility of Los Angeles's First Peoples, increase access and funding for Indigenous-led creative efforts and artists, change policies within the arts, and primarily to decolonize publicly owned art collections, such as those with the City of Los Angeles Department of Cultural Affairs and the Los Angeles County Department of Arts and Culture.
We have an application preview available on the website on Cali Catalyst's program page. It collects the preview and the application itself, collects contact information, some basic proposal details, such as a one-sentence description of your work and the communities you intended to impact. It also includes a narrative portion that directly aligns with the review criteria. And like the review criteria, these narrative questions remain largely the same. What's different is the specificity that we've inserted, which we've illustrated by underlining the new content. So the first narrative question asks you to describe the change-making action. In your response, include relevant dates and the oppressive, unfair, or untenable circumstances that prompted action to be taken. In addition, include a description of the specific causal role played by the applicant in the change-making work. So by causal, we want to understand how the applicant played a keystone role in the action. You can think of this as if you remove the person from the equation, right, the work, the action, the whole thing would fall apart, right? So they have to have played a real seminal role in the work that was undertaken. Number two, intention. What impact or outcome was intended as a result of the action undertaken? 3, impact. What was the actual impact or outcome of the action undertaken? And if it's in progress, what has been the actual impact or outcome to date? In your response, describe the scale of impact on the arts and culture sector and cite the tangible and measurable ways in which underrepresented communities gained power and influence. And the final narrative question is about perspective. Describe applicants' direct experience with the arts and culture sector and indicate whether applicant is of an underrepresented community. In your response, include duration in the sector, roles played, communities supported, and any other factors that have informed the point of view. One more thing to note, and which we kind of alluded to in a previous slide, we originally accepted nominations and are continuing to do so until the September 15th deadline. What we learned, however, from the first application round is that with this kind of work, my dog in the background, hearing a narrative in the first person as opposed to secondhand is much more compelling. This is especially the case since we're already getting external perspectives from folks other than the applicant through the reference checking process. So rather than kind of duplicate that, we want to hear the applicant's firsthand account, and then through the expanded reference checking process, which Nicole will talk about, get those other perspectives about community impact.
In addition to the narrative responses, applicants will need to prepare the following: support materials, a brief one-page resume that summarizes experiences and activities in the field. And second, up to 3 ephemera related to applicants' change-making work. Examples may include relevant URLs, press, screenshots, or photo, video documentation. You'll also need to prepare references. Provide 2 references who can attest to the applicant's demonstration of the review criteria and who can speak on behalf of the communities the applicant is hoping to positively impact. And this is new. CCI will also call on individuals in the field of a competitive applicant's work so that the people directly meant to benefit will influence the adjudication process. Please note, as was our process in round 1 of Cali Catalysts, we will only contact references for applicants who are finalists for funding.
This is Taylor. This is an image of Taylor Brandon, who's our final inaugural grantee. On May 30th, 2020, San Francisco Museum of Art used the work of artist Glenn Ligon to address the murder of George Floyd on Instagram. Brandon posted a lengthy response in the post's comment section that culminated with, "Museums kill Black people too." Her comment was deleted, which prompted a series of actions initiated by Brandon and her allies to hold arts institutions accountable for censorship and anti-Blackness. As a result, Brandon brought greater attention to the mistreatment of Black employees within cultural institutions and mobilized SF MoMA staff to keep the pressure on leadership and advocate for themselves.
We have just a few basic tips to help with your Cali Catalyst application and your applications to other funders in general. First, review all ephemera, guidelines, FAQs, application preview, press release, this webinar. Be clear and to the point. Avoid responses that are overly technical or dense or abstract. Have a friend, etc. Look over your application to see if any important details were left out or whether anything is unclear. And finally, reach out to CCI staff with questions. We're available by email, cali@cciarts.org, or by phone, 415-288-0530.
All right, so that is our presentation. We can open it up for questions. I think we'll just ask that if you have something that's very specific to your work alone, reach out to us offline apart from this webinar so that we can provide one-on-one support. Otherwise, please send in your questions. If you haven't already, we also received some in the last week via email that we'll address as well.
Do you want to go into those, Laura?
Sure.
Let's start with those.
Okay. A really obvious question. Why did you make changes to this grant? I would say in an ideal world, we would never make changes to a grant. We would launch and everything would be perfect. But that's just not reality, right? We anticipated this and knew from the launch from June 1st to anticipate changes that we would need to make improvements, we would need to learn, we would need to iterate. And that's exactly what happened. In addition, thankfully we received feedback from applicants. And so as a result, we want to address that feedback and what we learned immediately rather than waiting for an arbitrary point in time like the next calendar year. So we just wanted to address those head on, and we've made changes that we think will work for the program for the better. Another question, I work for an arts organization. Can I apply? Yes, absolutely. We at CCI, we center individuals in the arts, artists, arts workers, cultural practitioners, teaching artists, etc. However you're showing up. We also exist to channel resources to individuals as opposed to institutions. And so because of this, CALI Catalyst is very much focused on channeling funding to individuals. You can work for an organization, you can work for several, you can be part of a collective. However, any funding you receive will go to you directly and shouldn't support the programs or operations of an organization.
Laura, I'm going to stop you now. Okay, we have quite a few questions. A question came in, how many grants will we be awarding for this next cycle?
That's a great question. I don't know. This program is so new. We can't, unlike other programs where there's kind of a precedence where we know roughly how many applications to expect and how much we have to award, which is $125,000. This is in the FAQs. So I think at $5,000 each, and people can request up to $5,000. If everyone's awarded $5,000, I want to say that's 20 grantees or 25. So it just depends on who shows up in the application cycles, and that'll really determine how many awards we can make. I think we also wanted to be a bit conservative in the first cycle, again, not knowing what the future volume would look like, because we didn't want this to be a kind of first come, first serve opportunity. You know, I have to get in for the first cycle and thus I will, secure funding. We wanted to make sure we can spread out funding across the 3 rounds. We do have a caveat, however, in our FAQs that if funding is not spent down by the end of the year, we will go back to those folks that were finalists, but maybe weren't ultimately recommended for funding. Someone asked, can you elaborate applicants being from a non-metropolitan area? Yeah, great question. I would describe that as a metropolitan area. I would consider to be the Bay Area, Los Angeles County, and to a degree, San Diego County, but actually really, no, it's really LA County and Bay Area. And we consider those metropolitan areas actually through the lens of philanthropy. There's a big concentration of philanthropic investments there. And so to prioritize folks for whom they don't see as many grant opportunities that target them or their communities, we want to make sure that they're prioritized for this program. So if you live outside of those regions, that would be considered a priority area.
You want to answer this one live? I think it's good. Will the new criteria, excuse me, be considered for the 9/15 deadline, or it goes into effect starting 9/16?
Yeah, goes into effect 9/16. I mean, really, it's nothing substantive has changed about the program. We just got better about articulating who the targeted beneficiaries are. So impact on this sector, moving the sector so that it works better for underrepresented communities, having an informed perspective, those things remain the same. But as far as the impact goes, we just added more texture to what exactly we mean by that.
This one might be good just to reiterate. If I work for an arts organization, can I nominate myself for an event that I will be developing programming for?
You should just apply directly. Yeah, we're only accepting nominations for this until September 15th. But you should just apply directly. Nominations aren't weighted, what would be the word? Better than someone who applies directly. And in fact, what we saw from this last round was we're already, if you're a finalist for funding, we're already talking to folks that you've identified as references in the community. So actually, we prefer to hear your own account of your work firsthand versus from a nominator, and then even further removed through references. So yeah, we're just trying to come in closer conversation with applicants themselves.
This one's also about timing. Can the action that has taken place, in my case, a project I began in 2017 has gone on to others, it's presently in development. The tangible results happened earlier than 2020,
Oh,
with more in the future, TBD.
okay.
Maybe reach
I think
out.
I would, yeah, I think I would have to know a little bit more. I don't want to just say no. I mean, my gut is, well, if it took place before 2020 and there was impacts that occurred before 2020, I would say no. But I think this deserves a little more unpacking. So I would say reach out to us directly. And that goes for everyone that has, you know, we want to be in conversation with applicants to hear about your work, get your feedback. And so please reach out for any reason. And in this case, to just talk more about your work specifically to determine if it's appropriate for this program. Someone asks, who can nominate applicants? Anyone can nominate applicants, as long as you don't have a direct, I believe we do have some guidance around this. They can't have a family or financial relationship with the person they're nominating. So I can't nominate my daughter as an applicant, nor if I was employing my daughter, I wouldn't be able to nominate her.
This was a call I got yesterday about an applicant in a team, and one member is California resident, lives in California, but the team member lives in New York. Would they be able to apply?
I think what we say in the criteria, they have to be a California resident, as it is for California changemakers. And just to give a little more context for that, you know, CCI is itself, we're a grant making intermediary. We're a 501c3 nonprofit. We don't have an endowment. We don't have a savings account that we draw down to make grants. We're reflecting in a way the priorities of our funders. We are ourselves a grant seeker. And so our funders have restrictions, mostly in terms of geography of how dollars are spent. So that's one of the reasons why for this program, as an example, we have that specific California focus. Oh, this is a really good question. Would it be helpful to keep the new criteria in mind when completing an application for September 15th? I would say yes and no. I mean, again, the core of the program hasn't changed. We just realized more specificity is needed so that, you know, we're having a conversation and we're not assuming that people understand what CCI is saying. So that's where, so it's not even, I wouldn't even call it new criteria, even though I think I did do that. I would say it's just meant to illustrate and elucidate and make our intentions more understood. So what was written prior, you know, for instance, in the last, currently on the website, it should be just taken into consideration. And if that still remains unclear, follow up with us. I know a lot of folks, if you worked for a nonprofit arts and culture organization in San Francisco, you may have received a CALI grant, a Next Gen grant, or a CALI Accelerator grant. Will they come back? Because those were essentially professional development grants up to $1,000 for folks that identified as such. And I don't have a good answer for that. The answer is, it's an unknown. It's an ever-evolving program, and so as it evolves and you know, responds to needs of the field, it could come back, maybe in a different shape or form. I will say that one thing that was really clear at the onset of the pandemic was making it exclusively for folks affiliated with a nonprofit was no longer what's the word, no longer resonated with the field. So many people work outside of the confines of the 501c3 model that was first and foremost something that we wanted to tackle. So just to, I don't think I answered that question spot on, but it's all just to say that Cali Catalyst won't remain in this shape forever or indefinitely. It will probably look very different in the coming years, months, whatever. I thought I just saw another question about ephemera.
I answered it in the chat, but go and maybe, yeah, go ahead and answer it.
Oh,
I
it's like,
included- yeah, go ahead.
oh, well, we should read it out loud for people listening to the recording. Yeah.
So the question was, can you elaborate more on what ephemera means for support materials? And I dropped in the chat ephemera. So we asked for 3 ephemera related to the applicant's change-making work, and some examples of that would be a relevant URL, maybe press releases, or just press in general, screenshots of the work, or photo video documentation. So that's what we mean by ephemera for support materials.
Someone's asking about a question on the application that's specific to nominators. And it's a question specifically, I think the question was, yes, I remember it now. On the application, if you are applying directly or your team, you're asked what was the intention of the action undertaken. If you're a nominator, it seemed kind of uncomfortable, or uncomfortable isn't the right word, but it didn't seem like the right way to word that, because how could you as nominator, someone who's removed from the actual person that's doing the work, how could you know their intention? So instead we couch it in terms of motivation. What was the motivating causes for that work? So the nuance is just because we recognize that you as the nominator aren't speaking directly as the person that enacted the action, the change.
This is a clarifying question. Is the grant focused on supporting a given project or a given arts worker who could be associated with one or more projects?
Well, we're just looking at the past work or the work that's in progress. So, and then the grant funds are unrestricted. So you can use the funding to, in whatever way supports you. I think I'm answering this. That's how I'm understanding the question. The funding doesn't necessarily have to support a project.
My bold action took place in summer 2019. Can I apply? And the answer is we're prioritizing actions that took place in 2020 or later. I think Lori touched on this, but will CALI Accelerator come back? Now we don't know. We can't answer definitively. Since this program is always evolving, it may return in some shape or form. If you want to lobby for it to come back, please let us know. It's important to have and hear this feedback, which we take very seriously.
And on that note, if you were someone in a nonprofit arts and culture organization that was relying on professional development or leadership development support, you might look to our Quick Grant program, which supports arts organization staff in the city of San Jose and in San Francisco, and artists statewide. Someone asked for the September 15th application deadline. If nominations are finalists for funding, will nominated individuals be interviewed? So for sure, I mean, it's not, okay, first of all, for the first application round, oh my God, we received so many incredible proposals. There's incredible work being done around the state of California in the space of advancing equity, inclusion, and diversity. And so that's not to be dismissive of nominations that were put forth in that application round. So in this upcoming deadline, for sure, if the person is a finalist for funding, whether or not they were nominated or applied directly, we will still, reach out to the references that were identified. So that classification of applicant has no bearing on how competitive they would be for the September 15th cycle.
I can go back to the pre-webinar questions. I work for an arts organization. Can I apply? And the answer is employment or membership in an organization is fine, but funding is meant to support the needs of individual grantees and not those of the organization with which they're affiliated. Another question, I'm an artist activist, so all of my work is change making. How do I narrow this down in the application? And we will recommend you'll want to focus on work that you've done that's changing the sector itself, such as its industries, institutions, gatekeepers, etc. This should also be work where you played a causal role in any resulting impacts and where there's examples that you can point to of how underrepresented communities gained more power and influence. So think of this as visible shifts, such as a change in industry policies, such as a change in industry policies and practices. I don't remember if you answered this one. I have a few, the question was, I have a few ideas for a change-making action. Can I submit multiple applications or do I just submit one application? And the answer is we should probably talk one-on-one to learn more about your work. But the instinct is to just say one application. Perhaps the one application can talk about all of the actions combined, since you can really only receive one award per calendar year.
I would say if no other questions are coming in, we can end early. But of course, I think, oh, just one final note. I'm so glad this person raised this. Yes, originally, when we had the nomination piece, it was to cast as wide a net as possible. And it was for, essentially for nominators to take on the role of writing that application. What I would say now is, because we recognize that it's your time and it takes time to submit these applications. What I would suggest now is, since that's going away, if there is someone in your community that you think that this is a program for, to share this opportunity with them and to help them complete the application. But I absolutely value that feedback. And I would just say, if it isn't already evident that this isn't a one-size-fits-all grant. It's very new. There's really no blueprint for this kind of grant making. So, there's not a lot of support out there for kind of this kind of bold work that's addressing this sector itself. So I would just say, as such, we really encourage you to reach out to us with questions, thoughts, feedback. We're at cali@cciarts.org, or you can call us at 415-288-0530. And we're available Monday through Friday, 9 to 5:30. But I really appreciate everyone that showed up today and were with us, and we'll have the recording up on the website in the next few days. Meantime, the press release is there. You can read more about the amazing grantees and their work, as well as more about some of these shifts that are happening to the program.